Hey folks, this is Mike here with my end of 2017 special. As I do every year, I have an end of the year special to go over some of my highlights over the past year in terms of games. Unlike previous years, this year is going to be more focused on games that I've played and less in terms of like categories and what game had the best graphics and stuff like that. Mostly to try and keep this show a bit shorter than usual, and to also really focus on some of my personal experiences. I will say I do have a bit of a runny nose, so if I do cut out and pause for a bit, hey, I'm recording this in a different way, so I'm also muting myself so you guys don't hear some of the coughing going on. But on the same note here, yeah, future for the channel. I'll be trying to record in a different way for 2018 because if you look at this year, I've not uploaded very much. Website's not been touched for a year and a half. Part of it I've lost interest. Part of it is I'm spending more time playing games, so I have a lot less time to actually record and put videos together. So, for 2018, one last effort. I'll be doing more videos, not necessarily like this presentation style I'm doing now, but I'll be doing it using Open Broadcaster, the same way people live stream, except I'm recording locally because I don't have the bandwidth to upload live. I can't do live streams. I have 50K a second to work with. Most people find 64K music unacceptable, so yeah, imagine compressing video past that. It's not very pretty. I've tried it before. Having said that, yeah, I've also went ahead, cleared the channel. We were around 1,200 videos. I think there's less than that published, but definitely there's over 1,200 on our channel. Now we're down to, 10, 20 maybe? So the idea here is I'm going to start from a blank slate, clear out all the different genres and videos and series we've tried, and really just focus on one thing. Just do these single take videos where fire up a game, talk about it. No editing, no nothing. Because what's great about Open Broadcast is I've tried it a few times, and I've decided that's how I'm going to do it from now on. So I could fire it up, record, talk about it. Everything's done. The file it puts out, immediately upload that. The file size is better than the typical editing, and I don't have to sit through and edit, encode, upload. It's immediately record and upload. That's it. So yeah, eventually I'll touch on the website as well because I feel like I've had some issues with using it, and redoing it would be particularly good. So we'll see about that. So yeah, let's move on to some of the bid stuff. These are my top 20-ish games, in the sense that I've either spent a lot of time playing these or I completed their story. I could probably double this list, but I want to keep it reasonable. And out of these games, before we go on to my own top 3, we'll highlight a couple of them here. My multiplayer trio of Counter-Strike Global Offensive, Quake Champions, and Rocket League. I spent quite a bit of time earlier in 2017 playing all of these games. They've all been replaced by one game in particular, which we'll talk about later on. I'm sure you can guess what it is. Games like Absu and Killing Floor 2. Absu looked great. Killing Floor 2 plays pretty well. But I'm playing them on PS4. I played them on PS4. Now, as it turns out, I have both of them on PC because of the Humble Bundle, monthly bundles stuff. But at the time, I didn't have them on PC, so I played on PS4. And so that's why, both those games, really good. Pretty good games. I just wish I had played them on PC. Fury, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, and Middle Earth Shadow of Mordor. These are kind of action-y combat games that I don't typically play. But they've each done something really good for me to sit down and actually keep playing them. And except for Fury I've not completed. I've completed the other two though. Fury I started fairly recently, but I've not gotten a chance to go back as I'm getting distracted with other games as well. But yeah, I will eventually complete it. Having said that, um, yeah, Middle Earth, not into the genre, not into the setting at all. But they've got some neat mechanics. The game plays pretty well. Metal Gear Rising, it's in the Metal Gear universe, which does interest me. Also, Platinum made it. They make really good games, so that ended up coming together pretty well for me. Diablo 3, I've gone through a second, or I'm in the process of going through a second playthrough as of like last week. And that game, wow, they've done some work on it. I've been aware that they've been doing a lot of significant reworking, a lot of updates, a lot of changes, and over the years they've really improved on the game. Because for people like me who are a huge fan of the first and second game and played through the third at launch, it was a good game, but it felt like it was lacking a lot of stuff. And now playing through after all these changes they've done all these years later, I'm realizing that holy crap, they've really improved this in a lot of ways. So I haven't even gone into the new, the new campaign or the new expansion stuff. Haven't quite touched that yet, and already this has been significantly better. So yeah, I've not even really touched any of the season or the adventure mode stuff either. There's a lot of stuff that's changed, and so yeah, it's been super enjoyable up until now. So we'll be continuing that through 2018. Of course, Gran Turismo Sports on here as well. It's nice to play a new Gran Turismo. It's been slightly disappointing in some ways, but the more the some of the single player stuff they've been adding in has been nice. Some of the updates have been pretty nice as well. I know the main focus is it's more of a multiplayer game, but at the same time it is Gran Turismo. Some people do expect having certain things in it, and so yeah, here's hoping that there is a proper Gran Turismo 7 to follow up eventually. But if there isn't, I'm hoping they keep updating this to really turn it into that, right? So yeah, as for the top three here, these are my personal top three in terms of stuff I've played this year. Battlegrounds, not much to say about it. They've been shattering records in terms of player counts. I will say that a lot of those players are from China. I'm not saying that as a bad thing. I'm just saying that we normally don't get exposed to the Chinese player base, and they have a lot of people playing games. So the fact that they're hitting 3 million, even if there's 2 million of those which are from China, which I'm not sure if 2 million is quite right. I'd say 1.5. I'd say half of the player base is from China. That's from the numbers we're seeing, that seems about right. But even if it was 2 million, Battlegrounds still hits 1 million players peak, which is higher than every other game on Steam. So again, the reason I'm saying this is every other game on Steam doesn't have Chinese player base, right? They all have their own servers, they have their own services exclusive to China. If you look at a game like, say, Crossfire, that's one of the top shooters in China right now. I don't know if I can't find the numbers anymore, but I seem to recall seeing like they can hit up to 4 million players peak in a day. I don't know if that's right, or it's maybe 4 million unique players a day. Either way, they have some games that are quite a bit bigger over there, and so their numbers. When you hear some games are trying to be special versions for the Chinese market, some of it is due to the laws and stuff that they have over there. But some of it is people are chasing that because they have such a huge player base over there. Either way, still a lot of players playing it. It's still immensely popular. That 1.0 patch that they came out with definitely does deserve to be a 1.0 release. They've done a lot of improvements and changes. And I guess the big thing that I'm kind of sitting here and wondering is this going to be one of those games of the decade? It sure as hell seems like it is with the amount of players playing. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's quite good enough to actually be one of those, right? You look at, say, Doom. When Doom came out, so many games following that were called Doom likes for such a long time because that game was pretty groundbreaking. Even though they had been first person shooters before it, that game just did so many things so right. Uh, Similarly, Half-Life as well, right? There's a lot of games that did story before it, but that one did everything so well and defined the next decade in terms of storytelling for games. So maybe Battlegrounds will be that game. Time will tell. But at the very least, it's kickstarted a new genre. So if someone else comes in and steals their fame and glory or whatever, I wouldn't be too upset about it either. You know, they definitely would recognize that these guys really kicked it off. Number two here, Talos Principle. I don't want to talk about it too much because while the puzzle element of the game is really, really good, there's a lot of things that go beyond that in terms of like story and whatnot that make it such an interesting game. Also, not necessarily the basic puzzles, but if you're trying to do 100% completion, some of those extra optional puzzles start getting pretty insane and really, really cool. They've done a great game, regardless. You know, Crow Team, the guys who make Serious Sam. When I first launched the game, I was like, this seems kind of familiar. You know, the whole look and feel felt familiar. And eventually that's when I realized, oh crap, it's those guys that actually made this. And, you know, I went back and looked it up. And, yeah, lo and behold, they only had really done Serious Sam games for the longest time. And so for them to come out with this game kind of out of nowhere and for it to be so good, it's a really, really cool game. You know, massively impressive. I will mention, though, you know, if you liked Portal and that kind of game, you kind of want more puzzly style games, I'd say this might be good. It depends. If you struggled with some of the puzzles in Portal, this is probably not for you. If you breeze through Portal and you wished it was a bit more difficult, you probably will want to look at this, because at least at the beginning the game isn't too bad, but as you get further and further in, some puzzles do require a bit more thinking. And like I said, if you're going for that 100% completion, some of them can be brutally difficult, and you really have to start thinking outside the box to solve some of them. But regardless, I've had a great time playing it. You know, yes, it does get a bit challenging, but yeah, that's the point of a puzzle game, right? You want to solve puzzles, you want to have to think about it a bit, and they do a pretty good job at that. Third on the list here, Valkyria Chronicles. Kind of like the Talos Principle, actually. I didn't mention it, but you know, both of those games have been sitting in my Steam library for a while, and I got around to playing them this year, and I'm really happy that I did, because Valkyria Chronicles is also a pretty unique game. It's really, really interesting. You know, first glance, it looks like a World War III turn-based strategy thing. Um, but then it is a Japanese game, so there's kind of like anime and stuff in there. There's a lot of story. There's some third-person shooting mixed in when it's your turn and you're moving characters around. Like it's a really weird mix of a lot of stuff, but it works super well together. You know, on paper it looks kind of confusing, kind of weird, but I had a good time playing that game. It was really, really enjoyable, and yeah, we'll cover this a bit more later on in some of the other categories. But what I will say is, I'm happy that it came to PC. I'm really, really happy that it came to PC. I could have probably picked it up on PS3, but you know, if you get the choice of having it on PC, I'd much rather play it there. And yeah, it came with some of all the add-ons and whatnot. So anyways, yeah, that's the top three. Of course, surely I played more games this year. Yes, I did. These are some of the other games that I played. But the reason I put them after the top three is these are all games that on the right, there was the games I just instantly bounced off, whereas the ones on the left, I played for a bit and I eventually abandoned for one reason or another. Absolute Drift sounds like the kind of game I would really want to play. I like the aesthetic of it. I like the idea. Something about the controls just never felt right, so I eventually gave up on that. Fallout New Vegas, I really like Fallout 1 and 2. I always tell people, look, I've never been a huge fan of Fallout 3. I played through it, I enjoyed it, but I didn't find it that great. And so New Vegas has the same problems, and I think I've finally narrowed it down. It's not that these games are necessarily bad. It's just there's something about the Bethesda games in general that I don't tend to like. Because I have the same problem with Skyrim. I start the games and just there's something about them, between the look and the feel. I just don't find them very enjoyable at all. Despite trying my best, I played for a bit. I put a couple hours in, and I eventually found myself saying, I just can't continue. So uninstalled. Maybe eventually, maybe not. I kind of doubt it. Despite liking Fallout that much, I don't think I'll go back to New Vegas, and I don't think I'll ever play Fallout 4, just because of Bethesda games in general don't work with me for some reason or another. Infamous Second Son's in there. I gave up on that after losing my powers and getting my third ability, or I guess my fourth. Yeah, losing my powers for the third time, and gaining a fourth power. I suppose it works with the story, but I've done it. I've gained new powers twice already, or I guess 3 times. If you count your first power. I don't want to go through that again. It felt like it was dragging on, despite me trying to just do the story. I didn't care about the side stuff. I just wanted to go from story to story mission to get through it. Because I found First Light was almost perfect. It was really short. It was really enjoyable. It focused on one thing, and this one seems to hop around a bit too much, and forcing you to get. Like, I don't mind the idea, but once you're that deep into the game, you have to do it again, and it feels like it's just repeating itself a bit too much. Next, Machina. That's an interesting game. It feels like it struggles to decide what it wants to be. Does it want to be one of these arcadey games that you play over and over and over to get better leaderboard scores? If it does, I don't really see any leaderboards, which kind of not doesn't make it one of those games. But on the flip side, to be more of a arcadey style game with a story and or some sort of progression, I'm not getting any feedback in terms of progression either. It just kind of like you start the game and you run through chapters, but there's not enough feedback as to how I'm doing or where I'm going. So it feels like it sits right in the middle of those two genres, and it doesn't do either thing. So it feels like, hey, here's a game, just jump in, have fun, and there's no necessarily any end goals that I can see. Maybe it's because I didn't get to the end of my playthrough, but the fact that I launched it a couple times and I don't see an end goal of whether this is one of these leaderboards or one of these story kind of campaigny ones. That just lost my interest pretty quickly after playing it a few times. As for the games on the right, the ones that I bounced off instantly, I heard good things about Chroma Squad, but just the way, there's kind of the story and the setup for that game, plus the way it plays, not at all the kind of things I'm interested in, and not necessarily to rub me the wrong way, but got into it and was just like, yeah, no, this is not for me. I respect that it's good, but not for me at all. So, bounced off of that within 15 minutes kind of deal. Far Cry 3 and Far Cry Blood Dragon as well. Um, I don't know. I never liked the first game. I really didn't like Far Cry 2. I heard some decent things about this one, so I said, okay, maybe I'll give it a try. But it's got the similar problem to some of the Bethesda games in a sense that I don't really like those games either. I don't really like the Far Cry games in general, the way they play and the story and all that stuff. So I put a bit of time into them, but I bounced off of them very quickly, within an hour each. Uh, Beyond that, Scanner Sombra is actually an interesting one because I do like. Isn't it Intravision? I forget. Anyways, the developer, I forget exactly what their name is, but they make like Prison Architect was their previous game. They're super like that. Darwinia and those things, some of their previous games. Also really enjoyed those. Yeah, I think the idea was interesting, but when you got into the not necessarily jump scares, but the idea that you're being followed by someone, I kind of bounced off of that. It's like I was kind of into the idea how that game worked, but then it's like, ooh, hey, there's someone there and not there anymore. No, not for me. I don't I don't like that kind of game very much. And also Shopkeep. I put that one in there because it seemed interesting. I liked the idea, but then when I started the game, I had no clue. Like, this is the first time in a very long time I had to actually start looking up a YouTube video to kind of get an idea of what the basics were. There's a lot of games I've played that don't explain stuff, but I can figure it out pretty quickly. I know some people have a harder time with these kinds of things, but for some reason Shopkeep was one of those where I had no freaking clue what I was doing. Even after looking stuff online, I was like, I don't know if I'm doing something wrong, or I don't know if my game's broken. I had no clue what was going on. So I bounced off of that pretty quick, because like, if I'm gonna have to start learning YouTube tutorial stuff to play a freaking game, I'll put it aside. I'll play some other stuff, right? I've got a ton of other games to play, so I don't have time to put it into something that, at the end of the day, maybe it's not great. I don't know, right? But I don't like that idea that I had to start looking up videos. That's something I haven't done in years, so I found that to be a really, really bizarre game for that reason. So anyways, yeah, that's kind of the yeah, I guess that's kind of the whole group of games that I've touched this year. There's obviously quite a few others I haven't made it on either list of stuff I played and enjoyed, or stuff I bounced off of. But it is a strong year for games, and so I wanted to limit myself to 5 games, my top 5 games I added to my wish list this year, and as a way to kind of sneak in a pair of games, I put the Nintendo Switch here as number one. To me, that's a pretty significant one because I've had friends, I've had neighbors. I know tons of people have had Nintendo consoles. I've always been PC. We had a PS1 because my brother ended up winning it. Not because we actually went out and bought consoles. We've always been PC based in this house. So to have a PS1, that was pretty cool. There's a lot of different games on there. Eventually, we picked up an NES from like a yard sale at like $10, right? But that was like after the PS1, so way late into the game. But my grandfather had an NES, so I played it. We played it at his place when I was super young. Like I said, neighbors and those guys all had SNES, 64s, GameCube. GameCube was one that I haven't touched much. I touched a bit, but not very much. By that point in time, most people I knew had PS2s, so we were playing on PS2 instead. But yeah, I've enjoyed a lot of these Nintendo games. I don't have particularly fond memories like some people do, but this is the first time where looking at the new Zelda and how kind of crazy Mario Odyssey looks, I've actually been interested in picking up a Nintendo console. On top of that, the portability aspect for me is a pretty big plus. You know, the idea that as much as I like playing games on phones, they're not particularly great games. On a similar note, as good as the Vita was, there's not a lot of great games left to play on there. So, you know, the Switch kind of solves that issue by being Nintendo's primary console. Obviously, you'll get some good quality games on it, and there's already pretty good ones on there that I would have a lot of fun with. Having said that, I'm waiting on hardware revision. I'm waiting on the memory card prices and stuff like that to kind of drop. It seems like a good console, but the prices are a bit high here in Canada, and you know I've heard of some quality issues with it as well. So I want to give it a bit of time. You know, every time a new product comes out, you're guaranteed that the first waves of products are always problematic, right? As they make more of them, they get better, they refine it, they fix issues, they make revisions. You know, look at the 360, how many hardware revisions that thing's gone through. So yeah, I'm just gonna wait it out a bit. You know, once the prices drop, usually that's because there's a new revision coming in as well. So we'll see. But definitely looking forward to picking up one of those eventually. Yeah, next up on the list, Persona 5. You know, Persona 4 Golden. I played that on the Vita. That was a surprisingly good game. Not at all the kind of games I tend to play, but it was so well done. It was so interesting and so different because I don't play that kind of game. That Persona 5 feels like a must to be on this list. Even though I've heard occasional mentions that maybe it was not as good as 4, it's also different, so you know I can't complain too much about that. And I think I'll have some fun regardless of even if it's not as good as 4 was. I think I'll still have some fun playing it. Supergiant is next on the list here. Yeah, they've pulled a hat trick of success with, well, Pyre being the latest, Transistor and Bastion being the previous two. Um, I was not maybe as impressed as a lot of other people were about Bastion. I felt more like that for Transistor because, at least to me, Transistor had a much better gameplay element to it, while Bastion was really nice looking and had some cool things going on with it. I felt like it felt pretty, to me, it felt pretty short in terms of gameplay, and Transistor was more of the same, except they really focused more on the gameplay side, which was pretty fun. Either way, still both great games, regardless of how you feel about them. Um, you know, I still felt like they were both very good, and so for me, Pyre definitely high up on this list here. I do have to play that eventually, or I have to pick it up and play it eventually because, like the previous two games were really fun. This one has to be a pretty good one too because I've heard a lot of good stuff about it. SteamWorld Dig 2. Like I played the first one, but the first one was really fun. I played it on the Vita, I believe. So SteamWorld Dig 2 seems like the perfect game to, hey, play it on the Vita. Maybe the Switch, if it comes out for the Switch. I don't know. Or even on PC. I think on PC would be pretty good, to be fair. Because that's the kind of game I would play while listening to other videos. You know, it's a very casual game. You can sit back, relax, have some fun, and pay attention to said videos instead. But yeah, the fifth one on the list, I'm still not decided about it, but after hearing so much about it, I'll put it on the list anyways, because it does belong here, and that is Wolfenstein 2. Yeah, a lot of the story and stuff like that seem pretty wild. The gameplay seems okay. For some complaints that it's maybe not even as good as okay, but regardless, at least the story is definitely there, and it seems to have done a lot of great stuff for story in general. So The only problem is I've not played the first one, and I feel kind of obligated to play the first one, as in the first one that came out in the 2000s and not in the 90s, but regardless. Yeah, I think that rounds it off, doesn't it? So, 2018, before we end here, we're going to talk about some of the stuff I've been seeing for 2018. Because why not, right? As we're going into New Year, there's been a lot of decent things announced. And here are some of my 3 highlights here. Valkyria Chronicles 4. Since the first Valkyria Chronicles 2 and 3 were on PSP only, so I could still play those technically, but not the most ideal thing in the world. And then you had Revolution, which is some weird spin-off that came out earlier 2017. That was not particularly good either. So they announced a new one. Up until now, everything they've announced sounds really, really good. You know, it's at the same. The events of 4 occur at the same time as the events of 1, but you're talking a different group of people, different part of the war and whatever. So yeah, it seems like they've taken the first game and made a new version out of that, where you're looking at a different perspective of the story, I suppose, looking at different characters, and I don't know if they'll meet up with each other at some point or something, but it sounds like a neat idea. Next up, Red Dead Redemption 2. Would be kind of wrong not to put this on the list because so many people like the first game. I personally don't feel very strongly about the first game. I didn't find it as amazing as a lot of people did. But it's a Rockstar game. It was still really good, and I can't deny that. I just was not pulled into it to go through, play all the DLC and crap like that. Like after playing through the initial game, and play through the main story, I ended it there and I didn't continue further on. So despite not being into it that much, I still went through and completed it. I found it was definitely an okay game. But yeah, since the latest GTA, they've just been sitting there and they've been sitting there. They haven't been releasing as many games. They haven't needed to, right? They've been making so much money off of GTA Online, despite that not being as good as it should be, in my opinion. But here we are, new Red Dead. It's always nice to have new games from them because regardless how you feel, they're going to be great games, and I know this is going to be a good one as well. And third on the list here, as I'm having to mute myself pretty often now. Fortunately, I'm spending too much time talking here, so pretty harsh on my throat. But anyways, I'm going to wrap it up here with Anthem being the last on the list. Not necessarily interested in it in terms of a game, but I'm more interested in seeing it in terms of what kind of quality comes out of it. Because they're trying to do a Destiny-like game, in that they want this 10-year franchise idea, which it's not a bad idea, but if you're going out trying to do that from the very beginning, I don't know if anyone's been very successful at pulling it off. I'd say in some ways Destiny got close had they not screwed up the story in the first game. Even the second game, I'm not quite convinced yet that Destiny 2 will be that much better in that regard. But yeah, the big one for me, and the reason why I'm very interested in this game, is if you look at BioWare, you have Mass Effect Andromeda, which flopped pretty hard, and also they had a lot of other games and projects canceled within the last couple of years. So if you look at their typical schedule, it looks like they were releasing a game every year, every second year, and then you have like 3 games or projects with their name in it getting canceled. I'm wondering if a lot of those people were put on this project instead, or what's been going on, because that's a lot of gaps in what their typical release schedules look like. With yeah, and seeing how Mass Effect was pretty poor, I'm wondering if they were pretty starved in resources because they put them all into this one project, right? Because after having lost a couple of them, like those people got to be doing something, or else they're going to be laying off a bunch of people, which never great. But yeah, for them to try and target Destiny, do this 10-year game idea and all that kind of stuff, it better be pretty damn good because Mass Effect. I think Mass Effect Andromeda was supposed to be a trilogy, and they like shelved it because that was so bad. So I don't know. BioWare, not saying they're slipping, but they've had some rough patches. Even Mass Effect 3 was as good as it was. They kind of dropped the ball near the end there with that ending. It felt kind of rushed. So if they want to develop a 10-year franchise, they got to get it right the first time because you don't really get a second chance at that. If you do, you're pretty damn lucky to get a second chance to gain a player base and really restart building something when it flopped at the start. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And with that, thanks for watching. It's my 2017 special. Hopefully, we'll have some more content coming through in 2018. With that said, this is Mike here, and I'll see you guys next time.